We're finishing up a few projects this afternoon. Another video, the previous video I showed pictures of this bandsaw guide assembly. I believe this turned out pretty well. We made some new bearings and a backup disc. The blade will run in here like this. And also when we had this apart, I noticed that these side guides were quite worn. They were worn so bad the screw heads were actually worn off. So we've fixed up some of those. That just slides in a little slot there, and then you can adjust this in and out according to where your blade, thickness of your blade, I would imagine. It's always going to be up against this side, and this will guide it. Took all these screws out, got everything all loosened up. Then this is also, you can adjust it for the thickness of the blade. It's got a set screw here. The larger size was on top, and it works the same way. I kind of made a mistake when I put this one together. This is a blind hole, and that's kind of a no-no, because if this bearing goes bad, I'm going to have a heck of a time replacing that bearing. But we'll figure out something. If maybe that bearing's going to last for as long as we run the saw. But this one I did a little different. I cut that out so you could get in there and press that bearing out of there. So that'll be no trouble to replace that bearing. It'll push right out from the back side here. The same way with these edge guides here, they were all worn clear into the screw heads. This same fella had another little fun project for me. He had this model steam engine, and the governor wasn't working quite correctly. Well, I took it apart and fooled around with it. I found out that when the fly balls were extended out, they'd catch. Actually, just one of them was catching. And I'm not sure how this little model engine was machined or anything like that, but what I found was one edge of this was a little bit short, and when it would extend out, it would go past the center line and catch. What this governor does is control the throttle. You can see it move up and down there. And there's like a butterfly valve in here. It doesn't fit real tight. This is just a model engine, so it's not going to be real sensitive as far as the speed. That belt could probably be a little bit tighter. All that is a spring. You can see it's pretty slack. Also, after I got the governor where I think it's going to be about the best it's going to be as far as operating, it had quite a knock to it. The engine really knocked. What I found was when they assembled this engine, they just used a 1/4 inch bolt here for the connecting rod. It goes together something like that. And I don't know if it shows up here or not, but there's a lot of slack there. As well as the crankshaft end of it, over here, the bolts were loose. And when I tightened the bolts up, it got real stiff. It didn't turn smoothly. And I think when they machined it, they didn't get the flats real true where the two bearing halves clamped together. When you clamped them together tight, it twisted it a little bit, and it was rubbing on the outside edges here. The bore was okay, but it was rubbing. So we got that squared away. And this 1/4 inch bolt actually doesn't measure 1/4 inch. It measures about 2.45. I don't know if that'll show up or not. 2.45. I used a small hole gauge to check this, and it's right on 1/4 inch. Now this part here, I couldn't get the gauge to go in there real smoothly. But after looking it over, it must have been run quite a bit, because with this knocking in here, it made a little burr in there. So I ended up taking that burr out with a 1/4 inch reamer, and then using some drill rod, making a new pin. That'll press in there. It's a good tight fit. And it's got a little bit of clearance here. And there's an oil hole there. When they had this assembled before, they just had a bolt in there with this lock nut on there. Of course, that doesn't look very good. And I noticed that there was a hole here. It's not an oil hole. And I got to looking at it.